Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. The small town of Maplewood had always prided itself on its tranquility. Nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, it was the kind of place where doors remained unlocked and neighbors still borrowed sugar from one another. But in the late autumn of 2015, that unblemished veneer shattered with the discovery of a young woman's body in the woods. Jessica Lane, a bright-eyed 23-year-old with dreams of becoming an environmental scientist, had gone missing just days before. For her parents, the panic had bloomed quickly, culminating in frantic searches through the pine-scented trails surrounding her home. But as each day passed without a sign of their daughter, the specter of fear began to loom overhead. It was on the brisk morning of November 20th that a group of hikers stumbled upon her body, partially concealed beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves. The serene landscape that had once been a source of joy for many now bore witness to unspeakable horror. A small shockwave rippled through the community as news of the grim discovery spread like wildfire. As the local sheriff's department launched their investigation, Maplewood began to awaken to the haunting realization that the serenity they cherished had been breached. Friends, family, and neighbors exchanged hushed conversations, grappling with the question that now gripped their hearts. Who would have done such a thing? The forest, once a backdrop for laughter, now served as the stage for a burgeoning mystery that would unravel hidden truths about the town and its residents, revealing the darkness that often lurked beneath the surface. There, where tranquility reigned, a deep-seated chaos, invisible to the naked eye, began to emerge. The victim. Jessica Lane was not just a name. She was a vibrant spirit woven into the fabric of Maplewood, known for her infectious smile and enthusiasm for the environment. She had spent countless hours organizing community cleanups and educating her peers about sustainability, whether leading a hike for school children or volunteering at the local animal shelter. Jessica's passion shone brightly, leaving a trail of goodwill in her wake. Friends described her as a dreamer with an unyielding determination, resolved to make a difference in the world. Yet, beneath the buoyant exterior, Jessica grappled with the pressures of adulthood. As she approached her final semester at university, uncertainty about the future loomed large. Would she land a job in her desired field? Would she find love? The typical worries of a 20-something weighed heavy on her heart. But what set her apart was her determination to face those fears head-on. On the day she went missing, Jessica had attended a lecture that stirred her passion anew, leaving her energized and eager to make plans for the future. Afterward, she had made a quick stop at a local cafe to meet a friend, sharing laughter and dreams. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, that brief encounter became the last time anyone would see her. When her body was discovered, the news sent shockwaves through Maplewood. Jessica hadn't just vanished. Her vibrant future had been cruelly snatched away. Surveillance footage could yield limited leads, and the bewildered friends who once shared laughter found themselves engulfed in haunting silence. A stark reminder that something so precious could disappear in an instant. It wasn't just a loss. It was a call to confront the unknown darkness lurking just beyond their idyllic town's border. The crime scene. The morning air hung heavy with dew as Detective Mark Sullivan arrived at the crime scene, his breath visible in the cold light of dawn. The forest was shrouded in a somber silence, interrupted only by the soft crunch of boots on scattered leaves as officers cordoned off the area. The scene was stark and haunting. Jessica Lane lay lifeless among the underbrush, her once vibrant energy now extinguished. Framed by towering pines, the sight was eerily serene. The forest floor, dotted with hues of orange and brown, had become a macabre canvas, swallowing both the victim and her truth. Detective Sullivan's stomach nodded as he took in the details. Jessica was dressed in a light sweater and jeans, attire suitable for an afternoon hike. Yet the uneven placement of her body suggested a violent disruption of nature's peace. The forensic team worked methodically as Sullivan observed their movements, noting the way they carefully collected evidence. He could see the faint bruising around her neck, indicative of strangulation, a sinister reminder of how malice can hide in the shadows of a serene landscape. Nearby, a broken branch lay ominously close, its jagged edge hinting at a struggle and perhaps the chaos that preceded her death. Sullivan's mind raced with questions. This was not random. The signs of a crime were unmistakable. As he swept the area with an experienced eye, he spotted personal items scattered nearby, women's accessories, a silver necklace, and a torn piece of paper with a name scrawled up. Perhaps these were remnants of Jessica's last moments, fragments of her life left behind, in a scene contaminated by a violence. With each piece of evidence collected and a witness list starting to form, Sullivan felt the weight of the investigation settle on his shoulders. He was not just tasked with solving a crime. He was also responsible for uncovering the layers of a community shattered and left longing for answer. The forest, often a refuge, now stood as a haunting reminder of the fragility of life, and the meticulous work ahead would be crucial in restoring peace to Maplewood. The early investigation. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting beams of light through the dense trees, Detective Sullivan gathered his team in a small clearing. Just beyond the crime scene, the mood was tense. The urgency to unearth the truth simmered beneath a veneer of professionalism. They were armed with little more than Jessica Lane's fading smile in their minds, and her grim reality in their hand. The first steps in the investigation involved interviewing Jessica's friends and family. Sullivan prioritized these conversations, knowing that the connections and conflicts in her life might provide crucial insights. The sheriff's department set up a makeshift interview space at the community center, a building that had once served as a hub for neighborhood gatherings, a stark contrast to the sorrow that now filled its walls. One by one, Jessica's friends entered the room, their faces pale and drawn. Several clutched tissues, while others resigned themselves to long silences, grappling with the reality of their loss. One close friend, mall security guard Leah Matthews, emerged as particularly distraught. Between sobs, she shared. She was excited about a job offer. She had plans. When Sullivan pressed for details about anyone Jessica might have been worried about, Leah hesitated, a shadow crossing her features. There was someone, an ex-boyfriend named Kyle. They had a messy breakup, but he wouldn't hurt her, he loved her, I swear it. The name Kyle surfaced again and again during the interviews, each friend recalling heated arguments and jealousy that surfaced during their relationship. Reports of Kyle lingering near Jessica, at local hangouts, raised red flags, and Sullivan knew they would need to speak with him soon. While the team continued to gather information, they also scrutinized online interaction, social media profiles, text messages, and shared video. Jessica had posted frequently about environmental causes and community events, but there were also subtle hints of discontent. A recent post hinted at the weight of expectations and the anxiety of the future. As the day wore on, Sullivan felt the investigative wheels turning. Piecing together the fragments of Jessica's life, it was becoming clear that people around her held more than just fond memories. They held potential motives. Under the shadows of mourning, The detective sensed the first glimmers of a path forward, and he felt the relentless pressure build. Time was ticking. Any moment counted in the pursuit of justice for Jessica Lane. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and as the investigation deepened, the sense of urgency clashed harshly with the realization that leads were growing thin. As Detective Sullivan combed through the extensive notes from interviews and forensic reports, the walls of time felt like they were closing in around him. Each clue seemed to twinkle like a distant star, tantalizing but ultimately unreachable. One evening, Sullivan took to his desk, the room dimmed by the fading light outside. He meticulously reviewed text messages from Jessica's phone, repeated attempts to contact Kyle Daniels. Her estranged ex revealed no response. Desperate to track him down, they discovered he had left town the very day Jessica went missing, leaving virtually no trail. A search of his social media profiles painted a picture of a young man attempting to move on, but without solid evidence of his whereabouts or motive. The air was thick with ambiguity. The detective and his team ran the names of secondary acquaintances through databases, hoping to uncover someone with a hidden agenda. Yet, time and again they encountered dead-ends friends who had alibis, acquaintances with no records, and others who only knew Jessica in past. Sullivan started to feel the weight of Maplewood skepticism crushing it. The longer the investigation dragged on, the more whispers circulated about the police's inability to crack the case. Another lead appeared when a witness alleged they had seen a suspicious man near the crime scene the day Jessica vanished. Sullivan deployed officers to canvass the area, only to find the description vague and the lead itself rather inconsequential. Each dead end was a bitter pill to swallow, further entrenching the prevailing despair. The more he analyzed Jessica's life, the more it became seemingly mundane and focused on school, work, and volunteerism. No one could articulate a valid reason for such a brutal end. Despite assurances from the sheriff and his team, Sullivan felt the gnawing sense of anxiety that came with every unanswered question. In a quiet moment, he stole a glance out the office window towards the forest stunts, a sanctuary, now an unwelcome reminder of the violence that had intruded. The situation loomed heavy, as if the trees themselves whispered secrets of the past. But the answers remained elusive, slipping through his fingers like sand. In that stillness, Sullivan knew that the pursuit of truth was far from over. Justice for Jessica Lane needed to be found, no matter how long it took, no matter how many paths it led to frustration. A break in the case. As the leaves turned a deeper shade of amber, hope began to flicker like a dwindling candle. Just when Detective Sullivan feared the case had all but gone cold, an unexpected tip sparked renewed energy within the investigation. At a community event meant to honor Jessica's memory, a federal agent from a neighboring county approached him. "I think you might want to see this," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside, Sullivan discovered details of a series of similar incidents occurring within the past year. Young women going missing or turning up dead under puzzling circumstances. Each case bore striking resemblances to Jessica's, and while the towns were geographically distanced, patterns began to emerge. The federal agent had been tracking a potential suspect, a man known to frequent local venues, charming young women before vanishing. Suddenly, hope surged like a jolt of electricity. Sullivan quickly coordinated with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, connecting the dots of this elusive figure. As they amassed more information, they stumbled upon digital surveillance footage capturing the suspect in Maplewood. He had been at the same cafe where Jessica was last seen, posing as a friendly patron, seamlessly blending into the backdrop of the ordinary. The detectives obtained a clearer picture of the man through social media and witness statements. His name was Simon Kessler, a transient whose charm concealed a darker side. As they delved deeper, they discovered past allegations of harassment linked to women in nearby towns, all echoing similar sentiments of fear, yet lacking physical evidence. With this new lead, anguish channeling into determination, Sullivan prepped a tactical team to apprehend Kessler. But as apprehension mounted, he worried, what if they were wrong? What if Kessler was merely another phantom, an innocent passerby swept along in a tragic current? Questions swirled in his mind, but intuition urged him onward. On a brisk October evening, the team tracked Kessler to a poorly lit motel at the edge of town. Flanked by fellow officers, Sullivan moved forward with cautious resolve, heart pounding in rhythm, with the footsteps echoing against the pavement. This was a pivotal moment, one that could either collapse into further despair or surge into triumph. As he prepared to knock on the room door, a silent prayer rippled through his mind. He wanted answers for Jessica's family, for the community haunted by grief. Her breakthrough felt closer than ever. Sullivan felt resolute determination filter through him, a reminder of why he had taken up this fight all for a life that deserved justice, and a world too often cloaked in shadow. A suspect. The atmosphere inside the dimly lit motel room felt thick, charged with unspoken tension, as Detective Sullivan and his team stood poised to enter. He'd stationed officers at the back exit, determined to prevent any chance of escape for Simon Kessler. Knocking once, Sullivan announced himself, his voice steady despite the adrenaline thrumming through his veins. "Maplewood Police, open up!" After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing a disheveled man with sunken eyes and unkempt hair. Kessler's appearance betrayed a life lived outside the Martins-torn jeans. A stained t-shirt and an unsettling calmness flickered in his gaze. As Sullivan introduced himself, he noted how the man's demeanor shifted, tension rippling underneath a thin veneer of composure. "Mr. Kessler, we have a few questions regarding Jessica Lane," Sullivan stated, trying to gauge the suspect's reactions. Kessler's eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat Sullivan felt the crackle of defiance in the air. "What do you want to know?" Kessler replied, his voice steely. Sullivan observed the defensive stance, noting how the man leaned against the doorframe, as if bracing himself against the weight of their inquiry. "I haven't done anything wrong." The detective pressed further, recounting timelines and sightings, focusing on the day Jessica had disappeared. Kessler's inconsistencies drew attention like a moth to flame, each story laden with vague details and evasive answers. When Sullivan mentioned Kessler's past affiliations with nearby missing persons, the man's facade began to slip. His eyes darted, betraying a flicker of panic, but he countered, "You can't pin this on me just because I was there." At that moment, Sullivan noticed the remnants of fear lurking beneath Kessler's bravado, a telltale sign that spoke volumes. He dug deeper, linking his questions to Jessica's attributes and recent activities, attempting to understand Kessler's motivation, wondering if allure or animosity fueled his action. "You were at the cafe the day she went missing," Sullivan asserted, watching for Kessler's response. "Tell me what happened." For a fleeting moment, Kessler's resolve faded, revealing a man cornered by his own choices. But before direct confrontation could unfold, tension erupted. Kessler bolted backward, shoving aside furniture in an attempt to flee. Sullivan lunged forward, grabbing him by the arm just as officers stormed in, swiftly subduing the suspect. The struggle was over almost as quickly as it began. As officers restrained him, Sullivan felt the electric tension in the room shift. Here was the man shadowed by suspicion, a thread woven into the tapestry of uncertainty that had engulfed Maplewood. As he knelt beside Kessler, now cuffed and grimacing, Sullivan stared into his eyes, searching for conviction behind the mask of denial. "You think you can hide from the truth? We're going to find out what happened to Jessica Lake with Kessler in custody." Sullivan felt adrift in a sea of complex emotions. They were closer to answers, perhaps perilously so, and yet a nagging uncertainty lingered. Had they truly unearthed the monster behind the calm facade, or merely scratched the surface of a more insidious reality? The trial. The courtroom buzzed with a tense anticipation as the trial of Simon Kessler commenced. The ornate wooden architecture and meticulous attention to detail in the design of the Maplewood courthouse created a paradox, the artistry of the space contrasting sharply with the somber reality unfolding within its wall. Family members, friends, and concerned townsfolk filled the pews, the atmosphere thick with grief and curiosity. Detective Sullivan sat among them, his hands clasped tightly as he prepared to confront the weight of the evidence amassed against Kessler. The memories of Jessica Lane's vibrant energy haunted him, painting a stark contrast to the chilling accounts of her last moments. As the gavel rang and the proceedings began, Sullivan felt the collective heartbeat of the town echo through the silence. The prosecutor laid out the case with meticulous precision, weaving together witness testimonies, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Each detail painted a visual story. Kessler, lurking at the cafe, a gnarled branch from the crime scene found in his possession, and rack sheets of past disturbances shading his character. The courtroom watched, rapt, as each revelation edged closer to the truth they all desperately sought. Defense attorney Linda Marlowe countered fiercely, presenting Kessler's alibi and questioning the integrity of the evidence. And there's no direct proof linking Mr. Kessler to this tragic event, merely circumstantial evidence, she argued, attempting to create a cloud of doubt. Her voice, confident yet tinged with desperation, revealed the familiar tactics of defending the indefensible. A pivotal moment arose when Leah Matthews, Jessica's close friend, took the stand and recounted memories shared, her voice trembling but resolute. Jessica was passionate. She cared about people, about protecting the world around her, she stated, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She didn't deserve this. The impact of her words echoed. It wasn't just about the evidence, it was about the life that had been brutally cut short. As the trial continued, tension cracked in the air each day. Sullivan watched Kessler closely, noting the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the flickers of arrogance mingling with flashes of fear. Despite the challenges thrust upon him and his team, Sullivan consciously focused on the pursuit of justice, and not just for Jessica, but for the community burdened with sorrow and searching for resolution. Finally, after weeks of testimony and emotional turbulence, the jury delivered its verdict. The courtroom erupted into a hush as the foreman stood to read the outcome. Breath held tightly, in almost prayer. We, the jury, find the defendant Simon Kessler, guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict marked a pivotal momentous step towards closure. Yet it did not erase the scars that ran deep within the town, or within Jessica's fate. As Sullivan stepped outside to the crisp air, the weight lifted slightly, but lingering shadows remained. No one could change the past, nor could any verdict truly heal the wounds. Yet a shared murmuring of relief spread through the townsfolk, glimmers of hope that perhaps peace could return to Maplewood, and that Jessica Lane's legacy would continue to inspire change for a community that still held her dearly in their hearts. The aftermath. In the weeks following the trial, a palpable shift permeated through Maplewood. As the emotional dust began to settle, the small town wrestled with the remnants of tragedy, and the echoes of Jessica Lane's story served as an unbroken thread, weaving through each resident's consciousness. The weight of grief was heavy, creating an unusual silence where laughter had once flourished. For Detective Sullivan, the aftermath was a quiet, precise time of reflection. On his morning runs through the winding trails of the forest, where the sunlit paths once held promise, he encountered shadows he couldn't shake. The image of Jessica's smiling face haunted him. He understood that the resolution of the trial did not erase the consequences of the crime. It merely marked the beginning of a new chapter for the community, teetering on the brink of healing. Friends gathered at the local park for a memorial, each person bringing photographs, letters, and memories to honor Jessica's life. Sullivan attended, standing back with a heavy heart. The park glowed with flickering candles, illuminating the faces of those who had loved Jessica. They shared stories of her relentless spirit, her laughter, and the dreams she had held close. Each tale of warmth stood as a stark counterpoint to the cold reality behind her death. Meanwhile, conversations of change began to take root. Community leaders proposed initiatives focusing on safety and prevention, aiming to empower young women and educate the public about the signs of toxic relationships. Memorial events unfolded, honoring Jessica while instilling a renewed sense of vigilance. Maplewood transformed into a rallying point against the very darkness that tried to cleave them apart, a community wanting to ensure that no one else would share Jessica's fate. As weeks turned to months, the seasons shifted, each change in weather echoing the growth and resilience within the town. Detective Sullivan felt the encroaching weight lift, remorse giving way to a commitment to make necessary changes. Not just within the investigation process, but within himself. He began engaging with local youth organizations, sharing Jessica's story as a cautionary tale and forging connections to foster understanding between law enforcement and the community. In this newfound space of hope, Sullivan recognized that the solace he had sought wouldn't come easily. Healing would often be asymmetrical and uneven, yet he grew determined to move forward, honoring Jessica's legacy in every interaction, nurturing a spirit of vigilance within those who heard her story. For every flicker of light extinguished by violence, Sullivan sought to ignite a greater flame, fueled by love, support, and unity. Promise that Maplewood would rise from the ashes together. Jessica Lane may have been taken too soon, but in her memory, the town found a sense of purpose. A clarion call for change that echoed far beyond the borders of their small town, whispering into the hearts of others who had suffered similarly, urging them to share their stories of resilience. And in this continuing narrative of life and loss, The bonds of community, forged through tragedy, became undeterred, shining brightly like stars emerging from the darkened sky. Reflection. As the first snow dusted the contours of Maplewood, Detective Sullivan found himself at the edge of the very woods that had once haunted him. The landscape, now muffled beneath a white blanket, felt transformed not just by the season, but by the experiences that had irrevocably changed him. He took a moment to breathe, letting the cold air freeze his thoughts, while grounding himself in the present. Looking out at the trees, he couldn't shake the buried memories of Jessica Lane. The laughter of her friends, the hope she had harbored, the cause she had championed. The reflections of her life weighed heavily on him, each memory forging an intimate connection between grief and gratitude. Sullivan realized that while her life had ended brutally, her story propelled the town toward a collective awakening. He recognized the importance of facing the darkness that resided both within and around Thema. Darkness that couldn't simply be erased but instead confronted with unwavering resilience. Maplewood had emerged as a beacon of collective strength and vigilance, underscored by the sorrow they shared.